Hello and welcome to the Barcast. I'm your host, Nick Barr, coming to you on a Monday early afternoon here in New York. We're wrapping up the 7 today with the self-preservation 7, whose keyword is family. This one, I have some issues with the translation that I'm working through, so I might skip over various places, but we'll still get a good sense of the self-preservation 7. So Naranjo leads, it is often easier to recognize a sexual or social 7 than a preservation 7. To refer to them, each also used the phrase, the guardian of the castle. He also used the word castle for the self-preservation 5. I prefer to use the word refuge or lair. But what is the meaning of the phrase, the guardian of the castle? The self-preservation 7 is a person who makes alliances. Family could be an alternative word, but not in the true sense of the term, which is filled with positive connotations. The word family describes an aspect of life, but in the specialized vocabulary of the ego, there exists a kind of family game that can be played. In it, preservation 7s form relationships with people based on ideas like, I will be family for you, and I demand that you be family for me. Let's come together, I will serve you, and you will serve me. Let's come together, and we create a good mafia together. I mention the word smuggling because this kind of behavior can become shady. It is clear partisanship. There's a strong element of corruption involved. Self-interest, selfishness is behind this alliance, although it appears denied. Naturally, every form of ego depends on a lie that makes it seem like it's not there. That's why confession is so beneficial, so interesting for consciousness work, especially when the confession is public, because then one realizes they can continue with everything, continue being themselves. Thus, the preservation 7 is the opportunist, the person who must find advantages, who must gain something. It's as if there is a threat to preservation looming over them that must be compensated for. Therefore, gluttony in this case is expressed as an expressive concern to escape this threat to preservation by making good deals and arrangements at every opportunity. He goes on to describe a dentist who asks a bunch of questions. So you've got a new car, how's that going? The guy says, not so good. He says, I'll buy your car from you. So that kind of opportunism. No conversation fails to lead to business. They make instant deals because their mind is so alert for opportunities that they never let them slip by. Their position is one of someone who thinks that if you aren't alert, if you don't keep your nose to the wind to detect opportunities, you'll be a loser. So before we jump into the text, family is a difficult keyword because it's so loaded. So I like some of the proposals inside of this. Mafia, alliance. Maybe alliance is the best because mafia includes kind of threat. And so remember that the self-preservation 6, who we covered previously, their keyword was warmth. They're like the puppies, the teddy bears, whose strategy for safety involves them becoming kind of harmless and sweet, warmth, cuddly. So the self-preservation 7 has in some ways a similar pursuit, which is safety, but this version of safety also includes safety through opportunity, safety through pooling resources, safety through alliance, right? Safety through we're better when we get our heads together, right? So that's a very 7 move, is kind of alliance building in general would be a strong suit of a 7, including a social 7, with the underlying motivation for safety, security. And so where does this break down for the 7? Where does this become a passion? What makes this not sensible, right? Well, we're stronger as a family than we are on our own. It's that shadiness, that smuggling, fraudulence is another word that comes up, that the 7 may be in their sort of interactions be digging for opportunity. And like the 6, there may be some guilt around that. I mean, it always comes back to, with the 7, just the shallowness of it, that I think if the 7 looks hard at it, the 7 can feel their own, can access their own, can see their own, essentially, that they're manipulating others, that they're not in an I-thou relationship, that they're kind of in an, what am I going to get out of this? But not from a place like the 3 maybe of to build up their own image. It's so that I will escape threat and B, that I won't be trapped, that I'll leave my opportunities open. So the 7 sort of always has this like go bag on some level. And for the self-preservation 7, the go bag is achieved through relationships, alliance and relationships, and through sort of information, maybe being an information broker. So let's learn more about the self-preservation 7 through Albert Rams and other contributors. And the way that Rams describes sort of this situation is that there is a false paradise of like the perfect family. For the case of the 7, I don't think they necessarily have an actual, sometimes I call this the divine memory. You can actually access what it is that you truly once had. So for kind of canonically for the 7, that actually tends to be an experience in nature is a great way in, when they were fully present with what is. And so 7s actually, this is their gift of sobriety, the redemptive virtue of sobriety. They actually have this incredible gift to be with what is. And a 7 may have some wish to recover that quality. But this is different. This is a false paradise of like the perfect family. And this person's describing their own family history. In all cases, sort of the 7 constructs some idea of the perfect family and then feels the pain of the difference between their existing family and that perfect family. And so, he describes here, we're left with the idea that that was all a lie and then everything is a lie. Ergo, I can do whatever I want because there is no law, anything goes. So that's where you get some of that charlatanism or the fraudulence of the 7 that, let's see what Ram says about this. I don't want to go too far from the text. Life is going to be dedicated to the search and restoration of that primordial, paradisiacal state, that family mafia, in which the Preservation 7 occupies a place of tacit privilege. One of the signs of the process is that the way of constructing families to feel alive disappears. I continue with them, but now I allow myself to have my own true family. Similarly, what is left behind is the escape, often unconsciously, from what is dysphoric, from loneliness, from what is unpleasant, from emptiness, from boredom, from the little. So the self-preservation 7, in their less integrated state, get so much value out of family, being good for the family. I mean, their 7s are I don't think there's that much disparity, but remember the social 7 was the sacrifice 7. And I think sacrifice and family have a lot in common, especially for a male, well, and female. I mean, just men, I think, have more of a romance potentially around sacrifice than women do. Women actually kind of just do sacrifice, but men have more of a story, I would say, canonically, about the sacrifices that a father makes for his family. So I think there's a lot of harmony between those two, the social 7 and the conservation 7 in this way. But in all cases, the family ends up being used as a vehicle for me to feel privileged, me to feel good, me to feel powerful, me to feel safe. Let's continue. This chapter is not one of the strongest chapters of the 7, so I'm kind of looking for value here. What needs to be understood? It seems to me that what we Preservation 7s need to understand is fundamentally respect, which I believe we lost in the formation of that devour it all monster because everything is a lie, so ... And no, of course, not everything is a lie. There is honor, there is what is, and it's a... Yeah, so that devour it all monster. So, I mean, let's just do a little bit of exploration. So Naranjo hits this beat over and over again in the 7, so I think we do have to name it, which is the absence of the father and the depression of the mother is like a classic paradigm for the 7. And the absence of the father can then permit this kind of fantasy of family, right? Because the very lack of an authority figure can then allow the child to sort of have the fantasize about the paterfamilias, fantasize about the solid family with rule and authority. But then, of course, that structure doesn't hold up to reality, and then there's all sorts of issues there. And then on the other side, I think the depressed mother is probably the genesis of that devour it all monster, right? This inner feeling of I have to keep feeding the monster with my ingenuity, with my creativity. Maybe I'm very funny, right? A lot of comedians would be 7s. But deep down, they know that it'll never be enough. And there's that feeling of being trapped, I think, or of being drowned. But that's also where they get their own appetite from, their own appetite for tasting, their own gluttony. And again, for all 7s, the growth is just accessing the quote-unquote negative half, or the darker half of emotion. That, quote, pain, sadness, loneliness, and boredom don't kill, which their childhood, teaches them does kill. I must not be negative. I must not feel the realities of my family situation. Anyway, these feelings don't kill. They're part of life and enrich it, that you can be comfortable with reality, that not everything goes just to feel good, the beautiful gift that life is. So yeah, that's the self-preservation 7. And I'm just pausing because I want to check. There's a few things going on at the same time, right? One is this is the third chapter. This is the final subtype of the 7, so there might not be that much to add. Another thing is that this chapter is not the most rich, so there might not be much to add. And then part of it is I'm just checking of like, am I caught in my own 7 energy in some way, and just kind of like not engaging as deeply as the material wants to be engaged with. And I just don't think there's anything here in this text. I mean, the text doesn't give us much, and that's fine. But do I understand the self-preservation 7? And what makes them harder to see than, let's say, a sexual or social 7? This guardian of the castle. Let's just read this paragraph and see if there's anything there. It turned out that the brilliant, seemingly beloved boy. So there's a childhood story here, and I guess I was avoiding it, but because it's a mess. But let's just try to work it with it. Preservation 7s seem to have a self-constituted as a sort of I-you erotically interested relationship with the mother in the case of men, and with the father in the case of women. In the former case, the father does not take up the paternal role because he is subject to the mother, either by excess of authoritarianism or by being perceived as weak, so there is no good law. The norm, the limits are not reliable. In the case of women, there seems to be a father not father, a father who doesn't make it clear enough that his wife is the mother and not the daughter, who is often daddy's little girl. The paradise seems to be cut off. Everything is a lie. In his case, so he goes to France, spends a month at a neighbor, and the neighbor's parents hate Spaniards. He's a Spaniard, I guess. And so it was his first major blow, to be hated, and the image of himself in the world crumbles. So he's in France, and all of a sudden he's exposed. He's smaller than his friend. He's fat. He doesn't speak the language. He's doing all these new activities. So he's feeling ridicule, shame, loneliness. And then he accumulates this resentment against the world and his family for sending him there. Now, he also became self-reliant, blah, 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 but there was a feeling of exposure that would be difficult for a head triad, anyone in the head triad, anyone, period. But he lost this idea that he had, the brilliant, seemingly beloved boy was just a clumsy ball of fat. The world I knew was just one of many possible worlds, and everything that had been easy for me became terribly difficult or almost impossible. The child so praised for being well-behaved, always saying yes, getting good grades, not being too mischievous, and particularly eating everything and a lot of it, which was the ultimate family value. It turned out that this was not the only me that inhabited me. And at that time, that meant that it wasn't me, since I could only be one. So it was logical to conclude that someone had deceived me, that things didn't add up. I remember writing to my parents daily, and in none of the postcards was I able to tell them how badly I was doing, or of course ask them to come pick me up. I was in shock and unable to realize it. I also couldn't dismantle the fantasy we had in the family before going to France, that everything would be wonderful and very exciting. How could it not be once again all rose-colored? So in his case, at least, as a 7, he had this sort of fantasy life at home where he was so special and so polite and well-behaved, and look at what a great appetite he has. Then he's exposed to this other context where all his so-called strengths become weaknesses, and there's a shattering there, but rather than processing the shattering, the self-preservation 7 kind of doubles down on the idealism of family and fantasy. And so doesn't even acknowledge to himself or to his parents that he was having a bad time. Something like that. And, being able to say no, right, which is the bringing in the 8 wing is a big part of that. Okay, I think I've done everything I can on this chapter. On to the 8 next time.